I must send you a
Good
photograph,
evening
which is
and welcome to Gunner Shot. Gunner Shot में आप सबका स्वागत है. आज हम we're going to talk about elections in J&K, right? As you know, the government has announced the elections from next month, and it's a three-phase election with results being out in the first week of October. But it's a complex case. So to discuss all this, I have with me General Atta Hasnain. Sir, good evening and welcome to Gunner Shot once again. After a long time, we are meeting and
good.
we're going to
Good evening.
discuss we're going to discuss a very important topic of elections in J&K. Your opening thoughts, and then we'll go through the whole stories.
Good evening, Jai Hind. Yes, no doubt. A lot of people are saying that it is under the compulsions of the Supreme Court that the elections have been ordered, and that the government did not want it and perhaps got coerced into it. I think that's a fallacy. This is the best time for the elections. We've had a successful Lok Sabha election, and we must cement that with a successful assembly poll. And the environment is such at the moment where if we don't have this poll, it shows a lack of confidence in ourselves, a lower sense of self-esteem in ourselves, and it does not send the right message to the people of Jammu and Kashmir and to the region and to the international community at large. Remember, on 20th of September, Prime Minister Modi is going to be speaking in the General Assembly in the United Nations. Imagine the strength of his communication that day when he speaks with the backdrop of the first of the election dates having been gone through already. That's around the 18th of September. So I think this is a milestone which is taking place. 10 years down, we've not had elections for 10 years in Kashmir as far as the assembly is concerned. This is going to be a game changer, and we will discuss as to how this whole thing needs to be exploited by us for our betterment.
Yes, not like this. It's also the fact that, this virtually gives statehood back to J&K. And it is a natural follow-up of what happened in, when we scrapped Article 370. Giving statehood back, you actually enfranchising the people back to say, okay, you're going back to your normal, right? And to a different tomorrow of their choice. That's, I think, a very central thing over and above what you said.
There's a rider in that. There's a rider in that which I must highlight. Remember, a lot of people felt that the restoration of the statehood was going to precede the elections. There's a lot of people on the ground in Jammu and Kashmir were imagining that's not happened. I don't think there's anything earth-shaking about it not happening. A successful election will definitely put us on the track towards statehood, but still no guarantee, because a lot will depend on what the results of the election, or how were the election results taken by people, what is the government formation and the relationship which is emerging between the center and the state. A lot of dynamics will have to go into this before the final decision on statehood is taken.
Yes, sir. But I think the first thing is that what you said, the will of the people will come out, and then we will see, how to go about it. Ultimately, the will of the people will prevail. Right. Before, sir, we get into the whole story, I'll give the background under which we are, carrying out these elections. Across J&K, if you see, CPC attacks are still on, and there are massive protests in Gwadar, in Pakistan. Azme-Istikam is on, and not very successfully. Yeah, there were protests in POK and in Muzaffarnagar and all that, especially in the Kashmir part of POK, which ultimately, there will be some effect on that once we have the elections. And Pakistan as a whole, you can't ignore Pakistan when we talk of these elections. And we've had some, incidents on our side, especially in the Jammu and, Pir Panjal areas where the Red Stars are, Rajouri, Jammu, Samba area, Doda. north of Pir Panjal in Anantnag, Kokarnak, Kulgam area. We've had some encounters. Initially, these encounters were in the form of ambushes and strikes by terrorists across. But now, the last 2, 3 encounters, one sees that the army has got into the action. Though we've suffered a few casualties, unfortunately. But I think now we've started getting after them, and there's a realization that we can't let it be loose. So, but then there's a factor. So, in this background, uh, do you think we'll be able to conduct elections peacefully? That's the first thing. I want people to understand the capability of the army to conduct these elections, or I won't say conduct the elections, to underpin the elections peacefully.
Thank you. First of all, relevant questions. Absolutely. While speaking to any chief election commissioner, the answer you will always get about the aspect of the army is the army does not play any role in elections. Yes, absolutely right. I think our friends not in uniform need to understand that the army does not play any role in the elections. On the day of polling, the army is told to stay 1 kilometer away from all polling booths. What the role which the army plays is to create a conducive environment. That's the most important thing we have to remember. The domination of the security environment, so that there is no free movement of the terrorists, etc., of the overground workers. There is no violence per se in the adjoining areas. Particularly keeping a surveillance over the built-up areas, the larger urban centers, being in sync with the Special Operations Group, with the CID, sharing a lot of intelligence. This is a time when intelligence sharing will have to be really intensified. The MAC and the SMAC system, the State Multi-Agency Center and the Multi-Agency Center at Delhi, will have to work overtime to make sure that those inputs that they are getting, there's no point having inputs with you if they are not processed immediately and not conveyed down to the ground to places where they are required and where there's likely to be some action. So that's the role which the army essentially will be playing, keeping a watchdog kind of approach, keeping a watchdog approach and keeping a full surveillance over the situation, creating the right environment and enabling the election commission to go ahead and do it, letting the voter feel empowered to come out. Many times it happens. In fact, I can vouch for it in Kashmir many times. A lot of people will come to you and say, please send the army in some certain area because enough people are not coming out for voting. What is the reason? Why do they say that? Because there is a tremendous confidence in the presence of the army. If the army is present somewhere, the likelihood of any terrorist activity, grenade throwing, or something like that will not take place. So these are some of the unsaid things which the army also does. Otherwise, no direct role in elections at all.
Yes, I agree with you. I mean, I just want to dilate one issue. We don't interfere or we don't take part directly in conduct of the elections, but we give that security envelope, that confidence envelope of confidence to people. We give confidence to the polling staff, the school teachers and government servants who come.
Very essential. The escort duties, even the army does not involve itself in escort duties, but in the valley, wherever there is a polling booth, we are on call for any emergent requirements as such, but we still stay away because remember, there are lots of observers. There are lots of international observers. There are national observers who are there certifying this is a free and fair poll. And certification of free and fair poll is a very important thing in the context of Kashmir, remembering that 1987, we had a major problem.
Yes, sir. Let's switch. Now that you mentioned 1987 and let's look back and now. We've had successful elections, parliamentary elections a few months back. And hopefully these elections would go the same way as they went in the earlier cases. But compared to a parliamentary election, the assembly election is a little more sensitive. It is more emotive. It would stir up emotions on the other side also in Pakistan. So to that extent, it will be a little more frothy and bubbly and heated up. But would you say that when you compare it to the 99 elections or the 96 elections or the 2002, all those elections that we went to now, what is the major difference and what are the big things big changes you see from then to now? And
There
so that,
was a there,
yes,
there was a very, very active proxy war which was on at that time, 96, 99, 2002. I've seen all those elections, 2008. Um, in terms of violence in society, it was at a high pitch. 2002, for example, just 1 year before 2002, that's 2001, we killed 2,100 terrorists in that year. That's the highest we killed ever in the whole campaign in 35 years, right? So all this was happening. That means these elections were taking place under the shadow of the gun. And from Pakistan side, infiltration was on. There was a desire to make sure that they somehow scuttle these elections. If we are not successful in scuttling it, ensure that the population does not come out. So that you have a 2%, 3%, 5%. Overground workers were everywhere. There was an attempt to prevent people from coming out, right? You would throw a grenade somewhere, you create a blast somewhere. The intention was, it was not always intense violence, but deterrence towards coming out and voting. Because a successful poll meant that the Indian control was well established. Internationally, that situation would be read. What is the difference today? From a strength of 4,000 terrorists and more, which existed at that time, we are down to, in the valley, not more than 60 to 70 terrorists, perhaps. And in the Jammu region, another about 50 to 60 of them, right? High quality terrorists, I'm told, of course, the ones which are operating on the Peer Punjab. The difference here is that the urban centers, Sopore, Baramulla, Anantnag, Badgam, are generally free of violence. This was not so at that time. They are free of violence. Poll booths can be very clearly established. People will come out in reasonably festive kind of a mood to come and be able to vote. These are bread and butter elections, if you remember. You see, the real political elections are the other ones. The Lok Sabha elections, they're the ones which test the waters. And these are the real bread and butter elections which come, and you're very right, more emotive, etc. Pakistan has a greater sort of affinity to try and intervene in these elections. So attempts will be far more out here, right? I remember 99. I mean, I was standing at Avantipur on the high ground and looking down, and I could actually hear the blasts in different areas. Different polling booths where there were blasts and grenade attacks and all kinds of things happening everywhere. QRTs were being rushed everywhere. No, I don't expect that kind of an environment to come in this time at all. For one reason, which the public needs to understand. A lot of people are having doubts, the doubting Thomases, so to say that there is a very active militancy terrorism in the Jammu region. And therefore, the elections are not safe. Now, you got to see the geography of this area. The Peer Panjal is a far distance from Srinagar. You can see it there, yes, right? But it's a huge tract, right? And none of these actions are taking place anywhere near the important population centers. The army, in fact, if you ask me, there's one other perception. Because the actions are all happening on the Peer Panjal, virtually you can say the army has bottled up these terrorists on the Peer Panjal, and their ability to get out from there and operate in the built-up areas, the population centers, is very, very limited. They will attempt to come out definitely during the elections, and that is the time when the army must be active, in control. Lots and lots of, in fact, the ambushes, night ambushes, etc., will be very, very effective at that particular time. And we must prevent any of these people being able to come and interfere. Very good close synchronization between the army, the police, CAPF units In this case, a lot of CAPF units come from outside. They are normally deployed on the road or in the population centers, etc. That they are the ones who you have to brief very correctly. You know, we've had incidents. I've seen it. I've seen it in the Amarnath Yatra of 1999. How a particular CAPF unit fired, and then there was no stoppage to that fire. Lots of people died with friendly fire and things like that too. So that's something which is avoidable. We cannot afford to have an election in which we have friendly casualties itself, right? So these are some of the things which will have to be seen by those who are overseeing the elections. The Election Commission of India is very, very competent. They will have the right nominated people, and the organization, the bureaucracy and the infrastructure is all in place, very experienced. What we have to ensure is the security part.
Yes, sir. I think that what you said is very right, and more so because the election commission is just focusing on J&K elections at this point of time. They even postponed the Maharashtra elections, which were to happen almost simultaneously. So we have no issues on that. Now let's focus a bit on how do you stop? I mean, how do you handle Pakistan on the LOC and probably beyond that? Isn't this a right time to project your democratic credentials to the people of POK? And because there are larger gains in that and long term, it's a long term strategy. Uh, I mean, virtually, you can. This is one opportune moment where we can take the battle virtually to the other side.
Absolutely, virtually. You said you took away my words. Virtually. You see, this is the time when a social media, virtual information campaign, we don't have too much time. Therefore, for quick, fast track, capable organization, and we can go commercial on this, should be brought in to take hold of this and ensure that this is projected into the region, not just Pakistan, not just POK, regionally, to ensure that the narrative on India's democracy is strongly embedded in the minds of people. Everyone should know this is really a democratic nation. This question that 10 years we have not had elections, etc., should be then be put aside completely. No one should be questioning it. The second thing, a direct interference from Pakistan in military terms or proxy war terms. I think I have mulled over this issue many times, and I have come to the conclusion it's important for India to be able to convey a very strong message. If there is an covert, any attempt to try and hijack this election, if there is a major terror act whose antecedents, its organization, etc., roots lie in Pakistan, which is very easy to establish initially itself, India will retaliate. India will not tolerate something which is happening to dilute, to dampen our democratic character. And this is an important aspect which we must convey. A lot of people will say we make empty noises. No, we don't make empty noises. I think we have done reasonably well. Even the Balakot thing was a tempered kind of a response which happened. But there are all kinds, and we must wargame them, and we must make sure that we are ready in case Pakistan chooses to cross the Rubicon. Then we must make sure that we have the capability to send back that adequate message to say we will punish you in our time, in our own time, in our own choice of place.
Yeah. So what you're saying is Pakistan should be made well aware that the cost of interference in J&K during this election, especially during this election process, will be very high. And that cost Pakistan might not be able to bear.
Exactly.
And that is something which Pakistan should know, so that they stay out of it. And of course, this thing, I think that's a very important point which has come out. There is also an issue of projecting this election to the international community, which you mentioned. because a lot of people did feel that by scrapping Article 370 and reorganizing the states, India has deprived the people of J&K, that too in a, uh, yeah, I mean, deprived the people of J&K of their voice and everything. So I think that aspect also we need to go to the international committees.
This is a very important point you make. Very important. Post 2019, 5th of August, our efforts to reach out to the world to tell them how justified we were in doing what we did, that those efforts did not somehow gel. I am one of those who believes that Article 370 should have actually been done away in 1972 after the Shimla Agreement. Once the Shimla Agreement was signed, we should have taken a decision. Now, hereafter, Jammu and Kashmir is a part of India, declared part of India, and now Article 370 has nothing to has no existence here. We should have done it that time. Perhaps we had already gone very far ahead, and the international community held us back to a very great extent. Fine, granted. 1994, we again got this chance when the 22nd February joint resolution came. The joint resolution of both houses of parliament came together, all the houses came together, all the parties came together to pass the resolution to say that every piece of territory of Jammu and Kashmir, whether under occupation of India or not, belongs to India, and India will aspire to get it back. That was a very strong message we conveyed in the face of the US State Department's attempts under Robin Raphael, if you remember at that time, Robin Raphael's attempts to try and browbeat us on various issues, the creation of the Hurriyat, and on human rights issues and things like that, right? That was 1994. We still didn't do it. We had consensus. All parties came together. We finally came to it on the 5th of August. 5th of August, when we took this momentous, very courageous decision, which also had an element of risk in it, we should have gone on an information absolute jambori. Absolutely an overdrive and a jambori all over the world. Now, let me tell you, I went to Iran at this time, and not a soul in Iran knew. The narrative of the ISI was being played out everywhere in the media of Iran at that time. No one knew anything about the Indian narrative. 370 has been removed because Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part. You do not require to have special laws for different segments of society within one society itself. All this was never conveyed to anyone. Right? We've been slightly tardy on this aspect. All the decisions that we have taken have been very, very momentous decisions. But unfortunately, the follow-up on this part, I think this time we've got a little time on our hands at the moment. In the international community must be sensitized. We must have some good write-ups, etc., coming out through the think tanks, international think tanks like in the United States and Washington. There are think tank capitals around the world which we should concentrate. Sydney, Singapore, right? Manama, go down to Paris, Brussels, where the EU and the NATO headquarters both are. London is one of the most important locations. London, of course, New York. Go to the other end, even to San Francisco. Maybe you can even look at Beijing. You can even look at Moscow. Moscow, there are a couple of think tanks. And everywhere, we must have some of our narratives being played, being explained, small seminars. Something should be happening there, so that people take the bite on our narrative rather than the one which is bound to be put out by Pakistan in the near future.
I think so. I think we need to do this narrative building in 3 stages. One stage is now preparatory stage, what I call it, or the pre-election stage. We need to have a very clear narrative going during the elections, and we need to have a narrative going after the elections also. Right? And I think
this is not a momentary thing. It's not a momentary thing. This is a continuous build-up.
Build-up. And these are very important elections in the context of completely integrating Jammu and Kashmir in the state of Jammu and Kashmir into India. It's a momentous decision which you've taken. These elections virtually cap that decision. So to that extent, I think we need to go on overdrive. In fact, if I may say so, sir, we are doing this only for that reason. So people
Absolutely. That is the
understand.
reason why people understand it better. Once it's out
Yeah,
on YouTube, you have international people also accessing it and things like that. And I would request all our viewers here, the large number of viewers, uh, only don't be interested in putting down comments here. Try and proliferate this out through your networks. Whoever you find anywhere, talk about it, educate people on this.
sure. So what do you see the prognosis? How do you, I mean, I'm not bothered about how the elections will go, which party will come, and that's a matter of detail. But what do you think would be the outcome of these elections going ahead? You know,
You
and
see,
how do you
without
think
naming any
things will
parties,
pan out?
yeah,
Yeah,
without naming any parties or anything, that is, as I said, irrelevant to us, right? The democratic process will be gone through, and whoever wins will win and will become the victor there, right? We establish a government. Two, three things are happening. Number one, there's a slight dilution. I think something like the Delhi government model is being established there temporarily. I don't think that is going to be a permanent thing. It'll be some kind of a temporary measure because we don't want to enter into a immediate sort of situation where total controls are gone, democracy, complete democracy, and you suddenly find a creeping return of the
of
previous
yeah,
practice coming back. We
separatisms.
don't want separatism coming back. We've controlled it with difficulty. We had to use an element of coercion, which we would never want to use again because it's a risky thing to use coercion also. And therefore, for example, stone throwing, uh, how did we manage to control it? Primarily through the control of the financial networks, through terror financing and things like that. So these are some of the things which will happen here. But the more important thing at the end of the day will be the relationship which is established between the government which comes to power and the central government. You see, it cannot be a fractious kind of a relationship because its area is too sensitive. We need to have a broad understanding. And obviously, we are displaying this kind of a maturity as a nation that an area which was in the throes of separatism at one time, we are now reintroducing democracy there in a fairly quick time frame, and trusting everyone, getting a new government into place, etc. It shouldn't happen that there's a rollback to the situation of the 90s and the early part of the millennium. So the government will have to obviously, I mean, move in steps. Don't expect that everything will happen overnight. Total democracy, everything out of control will be there, power
Hmm.
down to the people, etc. I would say it will happen in phases, right? And,
So
and
what
that's
what
how it
what?
should happen.
So what you're saying is the elections will go through, a government will come, and the government will be of the still of the union territory, like it happens in all other union territories, like in Pondicherry and all that. I mean, we have so many union territories. So the that government will settle in a relationship between the state
Center.
and the new state government, and I won't say state government, the union territory government and the central government will start. Business will start, and which will pave way back for statehood to be given to thing. So this is a step by step process, right, sir? So I think that's a very good way of putting the whole story. Uh, so what you're saying essentially is this is a well thought out plan.
Of course, I'm convinced it's a well thought plan. What happened on the 5th of August 2019 was not an overnight decision either, as we all understand. It was very deeply thought out. Right from 2014-15, the government had been working on it, right? And it took a lot of homework, took a lot of legal work to be gone into, the justification from everything. At the end of the day, I think the government could pat itself on the back to say, yes, all the legal loopholes here and there had been catered for. And 2019 decision took a lot of some people by surprise, but majority of us knew that something big is coming, and we knew that this kind of a thing is going to happen, right? I think it was a momentous decision, although slightly risky at that particular time, because we were not certain how the streets are going to respond, react. We were led, most of us were led through this understanding over the years that if India ever looks at 370, the resignment of 370, it can forget Kashmir. Its hand over Kashmir will be gone. That's the kind of narrative which was being created around us. And I think in the midst of that, a very, very bold decision still was taken at that particular time.
Right, sir. Then there's always also a view that, look, due to all these violent incidents which have happened, the spike in the terror which has happened, uh, is it the right time to, go through these elections? Of course, my view is this is the best time, because if you can't get cowed down by just a few of these things, and this will continue. So I think this is the best time to go through with these elections, and you can't delay it any further. Your views on this part, sir?
Absolutely. I think I covered this in my initial remarks itself, that there is no two ways about it. We just had to go in, especially after the successful Lok Sabha elections, 58% were turnout. What are we waiting for, right? Are we going to wait for a near perfect situation? Are we going to be
It never happens.
It will not happen. We have to look for it. We have to get our narratives in place and make things happen. That is the more important.
Right. So I think so. We've had half an hour of discussion, focused discussion. We've laid out in bare terms as to what we need to do. We need to put in a narrative, a overall set of narratives of what's happening to highlight the importance of these elections. We also have to take adequate steps to ensure that these elections are conducted successfully. And of course, the third aspect of the story is once the elections are conducted, take it forward to the next step, that is making J&K back from a union territory to a state. So we are in the midway stage with this, and we'll talk about more about this whole story as things unfold, sir. With this, I'll take a few questions, because as we decided, this is only a primer of a lot of events to come ahead. And as the story unfolds over the next month, those of you who are watching Gunner Shot, please understand we're going to have regular coverage of this, because this, I think, is a very important point in our national history, right? Because this will have repercussions not only in Pakistan but also in China.